She found the proof that would ruin him. So he sent his thugs to leave her for dead. When that didn't work, he took her son. But he made one fatal mistake. He never imagined who she would call for help. Welcome, everyone, to Blissful Whispers. That is just the first 12 seconds, and the stakes could not be higher. This story is about to unfold, and our community is watching from all over the world. I want to see it in the comments right now. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? And if you believe a monster who targets a child deserves to be brought down, do two things for me. Smash that like button and hit subscribe, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of the justice that is coming. Now, let's find out who she called. The city skyline, a jagged line of ambition and glass, was Sloane Prescott's kingdom. From her corner office on the 50th floor of the Prescott Industries Tower, she commanded a digital empire. The room was a testament to minimalist power. A single slab of polished obsidian for a desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a holographic display shimmering in the air before her. On it, the faces of her board members from Tokyo, London, and Berlin watched her, their expressions a mixture of respect and intimidation. The acquisition of Omnicore is not a suggestion, it's a necessity. Sloane's voice was calm, cutting through the digital static like a scalpel. Their logistical network is the key to our Phase 4 expansion. Any objections based on sentiment are irrelevant. A man from the London office, a veteran executive twice her age, cleared his throat. Sloane, with all due respect, the price is astronomical. We'd be leveraging ourselves to the hilt. Respectfully, Arthur, your job is to manage risk, not to be paralyzed by it. She manipulated the hologram with a flick of her wrist, and a new set of projections appeared, glowing with aggressive growth forecasts. This is the price of the future. We either pay it or we become a footnote in someone else's history book. We move forward. The finality in her tone left no room for argument. One by one, the faces on the screen nodded their assent. She was 34 years old, and she had them all dancing to her tune. But when the city lights began to blur into a glittering tapestry below, the CEO receded. 8 hours later, the power suit was replaced by soft cashmere sweatpants, and the boardroom was traded for a bedroom filled with the soft glow of a rocket ship nightlight. Sloane sat on the edge of a small bed, her voice now a gentle murmur. And so the brave knight, Sir Miles, climbed the crystal mountain to face the grumpy dragon. 6-year-old Miles, a bundle of boundless energy tucked under a dinosaur-themed duvet, giggled. The dragon's not grumpy, Mom. He's just hungry. Sloane smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that never saw the light of her office. She brushed a lock of sandy brown hair from his forehead. You're right. He's just hungry. Maybe he just needs a friend. This was her anchor, this small boy with his profound, simple wisdom. He was the reason for the 18-hour days, the brutal negotiations, the relentless drive. He was the only future that truly mattered. As he drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself a moment of quiet, the immense pressure of her world settling back onto her shoulders like a physical weight. The Omnicore deal was just the surface. Deeper, in the company's encrypted servers, she was hunting a different kind of dragon, a thief who was bleeding her father's legacy dry from the inside out. 49 floors below Sloane's silent office, the world was a symphony of warmth and noise. The daily grind, the cafe nestled in the lobby of the Prescott Tower, was an oasis of controlled chaos. The air was thick with the rich, dark scent of espresso and the sweet perfume of fresh pastries. Behind the counter, moving with an easy, practiced grace, was Paige Russo. Double shot latte for Mark, extra hot, just how you like it, she said, sliding the cup across the counter with a smile that reached her eyes. And a chocolate croissant for the future CEO. She winked at a young analyst who blushed as he paid. Paige had a knack for remembering the little things, for making the frantic corporate drones feel, for a moment, like people. She navigated the morning rush not as a chore, but as a dance, her movements economical and precise. Around 10 o'clock, Miles would sometimes come down with his nanny, his small hand clutching a few dollars for a hot chocolate. Paige always made a special show of it. Well, if it isn't my most important customer, she'd say, leaning over the counter. The usual Mr. Prescott? Miles would nod solemnly. With extra marshmallows. An executive decision. I like it. She treated him not as the boss's kid, but simply as a kid. A sweet boy who liked marshmallows. It was this simple, genuine kindness that made Miles's face light up whenever he saw her. and it was why Sloane always felt a sense of relief knowing Paige was downstairs. In a building full of ambition and agendas, Paige was a pocket of uncomplicated warmth. But Paige had her own world, one that existed far beyond the hiss of the espresso machine. A world she kept locked away. That evening, after her shift, she stood in her small, neat apartment overlooking a quiet side street, her phone pressed to her ear. The voice on the other end was a low baritone, rough around the edges, and heavy with a tension that traveled across the hundreds of miles between them. "You okay?" Cole asked. It wasn't a greeting, it was a diagnostic. "I'm fine," Paige answered, her gaze distant. "Just a long day." The line was silent for a moment, filled only with a faint, crackling static. On the other end, Cole Russo sat in a Spartan cabin deep in the wooded wilderness of the Sierra Nevada. The room contained only a bed, a table, and a wood stove. Sunlight streamed through a dusty window, glinting off the blued steel of the rifle he was methodically disassembling on the table. Each piece was cleaned with an unnerving, practiced focus. His movements were spare, efficient, devoid of any wasted motion. He was a man who had stripped his life down to the bare essentials. "Been practicing?" he asked, his voice flat. Paige's posture straightened slightly. She glanced at the heavy-duty first aid kit tucked away on a high shelf in her closet, a kit that looked more like something from a combat zone than a civilian apartment. It was filled with tourniquets, hemostatic agents, and suture kits. "Every week," she confirmed. "The sequences, the pressure points, everything you taught me." "Good," was all he said. There was no praise in his tone, only the detached confirmation of a completed task. "Stay sharp, Paige. You never know when the world will decide to get loud." He disconnected before she could say "I love you." Paige sighed, the warmth of the cafe a distant memory. She looked out her window at the city lights, the same lights Sloane Prescott saw from her tower. Two women in two different worlds, oblivious to the fact that a storm was coming that would smash those worlds together, and that the quiet, haunted man in the mountains held the key to surviving it. The city below had surrendered to the night, a silent ocean of scattered lights. But on the 50th floor of the Prescott Industries Tower, one light still burned. Sloane Prescott was on a hunt, and the glow of the holographic display was her only guide. For weeks, a single anomaly in the quarterly reports had been a splinter in her mind, a rounding error too consistent to be an error at all. A whisper of wrongness in a fortress of numbers. Tonight she was done whispering. Fueled by the bitter dregs of a third coffee, she bypassed the polished corporate dashboards and dove deep into the raw server data, the company's digital soul. Line by line, she cross-referenced encrypted payment ledgers against vendor manifests, her fingers moving with a surgeon's precision across the holographic interface. It was a digital labyrinth, designed to exhaust and confuse. But Sloane had built parts of this maze herself. She knew its secrets. At 2:17 a.m. she found it. A loose thread. A payment to a logistics company she'd never heard of, Ariadne Holdings, for services never rendered. Her heart began a low, steady drum against her ribs. She followed the digital thread, pulling it through layers of firewalls and ghost accounts. The thread led to another shell corporation, Vector Solutions, and then another. Each was a dead end, a digital ghost town. But they all shared one thing, a single recurring digital signature buried deep in the metadata. The ghost had left a footprint. Sloane ran the signature through a decryption algorithm of her own design. The progress bar filled with agonizing slowness. She held her breath, the silence of the office pressing in on her. Then a name materialized on the screen, stark and damning against the cool blue light. Harrison Thorne. The breath left her body in a pained rush. Not just her CFO. Her father's most trusted friend. The man who had placed a comforting hand on her shoulder at the funeral and promised to help her carry the legacy. The man she had trusted implicitly. Her vision tunneled. The name was the key that unlocked everything. Suddenly, the complex web of offshore accounts and falsified invoices resolved into a clear, horrifying picture. A river of capital, siphoned away transaction by transaction over 2 years. $17 million stolen from her company, from her father's legacy, by the man who was meant to be its staunchest guardian. The flicker of exhaustion in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire. There was no grief in that moment, only ice. She moved with purpose, retrieving a sleek, biometric locked secure drive from a hidden compartment in her desk. With a few swift gestures, she copied the entire encrypted data trail, the ledgers, the ghost accounts, the signature, Thorne's name, and secured it. Then she pulled up her calendar. Her fingers flew, her knuckles white. She created a new event for 9 a.m. Meeting, emergency board session. Attendees, all board members. Subject, full financial disclosure. She hit send. The invitation shot out into the sleeping world. The trap was set. Harrison Thorne had no idea he was walking into his own execution. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing Sloane into a world of brushed steel and silence. The hum of the descent was the first moment of quiet she'd had in hours, a brief caesura between the victory of her discovery and the war to come. She felt the weight of the secure drive in her briefcase, a dense, potent object that held Harrison Thorne's future, and hers. The car slowed, its chimes soft in the cavernous quiet of the subterranean parking garage. The doors opened onto a dim, concrete landscape, where shadows pooled like oil slicks between support pillars. Her heels clicked a sharp, solitary rhythm against the floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the stillness. A single light flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted familiar shapes into monstrous forms. She walked toward her sleek, black sedan, her mind already rehearsing the opening lines for the 9 a.m. board meeting. She would be calm, surgical. She would present the facts and watch the empire Thorne had built on lies crumble to dust. She didn't hear them until it was too late. The sound wasn't a footstep, it was a sudden, violent displacement of air to her left. She turned, a gasp catching in her throat, as two figures materialized from the darkness behind a white utility van. They were clad in black, their faces erased by ski masks. There was no demand, no threat, just a terrifying, impersonal speed. One lunged, grabbing her arm in a grip of iron, yanking her off balance. Her briefcase, the vessel of her victory, flew from her hand. It skidded across the grimy pavement, bursting open and scattering a flurry of papers like dead leaves. The other man moved to intercept it, but his target was never the contents. He was there to ensure she couldn't reach them. The first man's fist drove into her stomach, a brutal, concussive blow that stole her breath and sent a starburst of pain through her core. She doubled over, gasping, her meticulously planned speech dissolving into a primal need for air. Before she could recover, the second man grabbed her, his movements ruthlessly efficient. He shoved her backward hard. The back of her head connected with a concrete pillar with a sickening, wet crack. The world tilted, the dim lights of the garage smearing into streaks. Pain, white-hot and absolute, exploded through her skull. Miles was her only coherent thought, a desperate beacon in the encroaching darkness. One of the figures loomed over her, a hand raised to strike again. A hissed voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "That's enough. We're done." Footsteps pounded away. A car door slammed. An engine roared to life, the squeal of tires echoing through the concrete tomb. Then silence. Sloane lay on the cold, unforgiving floor, the scattered papers of her life's work around her. She tried to move, to call out, but her body was a leaden weight, her voice a silent scream. The darkness rushed in and she knew no more. Upstairs, in the gleaming, sterile lobby of the Prescott Tower, Miles tapped his foot impatiently. His nanny, Mrs. Gable, checked her watch for the fourth time. 10 minutes had passed since his mom's text. "She's probably just on a call, sweetie," Mrs. Gable said, her voice a little too bright. She tried Sloane's cell. It went straight to voicemail. "Something's wrong," Miles said, his 6-year-old intuition cutting through the adult platitudes. He pulled his hand free from hers and darted toward the elevator bank. "We have to go find her." "Miles, wait." But he was already jabbing the button for sublevel 2. The doors opened onto the oppressive dimness of the garage. Mrs. Gable stepped out cautiously, her hand tight on Miles's shoulder. "Miss Prescott?" she called out, her voice trembling. A faint moan answered from ahead. Then they saw her. Mrs. Gable screamed, a raw, piercing sound that shattered the quiet. Sloane was a crumpled shape on the floor, her face bruised, her hair matted with blood. The security guard, a portly man named George, came running, fumbling with the radio on his shoulder, his face pale with panic. Miles didn't scream. He didn't cry. The world seemed to slow down, the adults' panic a useless, buzzing noise. He saw his mother, broken and still, and his mind locked onto a single clear thought. He knew who could help. He turned and ran. He burst through the glass doors of the daily grind, the bell above the door chiming frantically. Paige Russo was wiping down the gleaming espresso machine, preparing for closing. She looked up, a smile ready, but it died on her lips when she saw the raw terror on the little boy's face. Miles launched himself at her, his small hands grabbing the fabric of her apron. "Paige, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "It's my mom. She's on the floor and she won't wake up. You have to help her." The waitress was gone. In her place was someone else, someone forged in a crucible of urgency. Paige didn't ask a single question. She vaulted over the low counter in a single fluid motion and sprinted toward the lobby, Miles's small hand gripped tightly in hers. She arrived at a scene of pure chaos. Mrs. Gable was hysterical. George was shouting incoherent codes into his radio. Paige filtered it all out. Her focus narrowed to the still form on the ground. The training Cole had drilled into her, the endless repetitions in her small apartment took over. Zest. Control. She dropped to her knees beside Sloane. "George, call 911 again," she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic with an edge of steel. "Tell them you have an unconscious female, early 30s, significant head trauma. Tell them it's a level 1. He stared at her, dumbfounded, then nodded and spoke into his radio with renewed purpose. Paige's hands were already moving, a blur of practiced efficiency. Pulse, thready but present. Breathing shallow. She gently tilted Sloane's head back, clearing her airway. Her eyes scanned the injuries, cataloging them. Laceration on the scalp, bleeding heavily. She ripped a stack of clean, folded paper napkins from a nearby dispenser and pressed them firmly against the wound. Direct pressure. Stop the bleeding. With one hand maintaining pressure, she used the other to carefully roll Sloane onto her side, into the recovery position, ensuring she wouldn't choke if she vomited. Every movement was precise, gentle, and devoid of hesitation. When the paramedics rushed in moments later, they saw the scene. The weeping nanny, the flustered guard, and the young woman in a coffee-stained apron, calmly holding pressure on the victim's head, her face a mask of intense concentration. The lead paramedic knelt, his eyes quickly assessing Paige's work. He checked Sloane's airway, glanced at the correctly applied pressure and the recovery position. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. He looked from Paige to his partner. "Airway's clear, she's positioned perfectly," he said, a note of awe in his voice. He looked back at Paige. "Who are you?" Before she could answer, his partner added, "This wasn't luck. Whoever did this just saved her life." Harrison Thorne's solution to being caught was to send thugs after a single mother. If you believe that cowards who hide behind violence are the worst kind of villains, hit the like button. Only people who admire bullies would just scroll on by. The first thing Sloane registered was the smell. A sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic that scoured her sinuses. The second was a sound, a soft, rhythmic beeping that was both annoying and, for some reason, deeply reassuring. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like lead shutters. A dull, concussive throb pulsed behind her right temple, a painful drumbeat keeping time with the monitor. She forced her eyes open. The world was a blurry wash of white. The ceiling. Fluorescent lights. She was in a hospital. The memories crashed back in a chaotic, violent torrent. The dark garage, the masked faces, the blinding pain. A gasp escaped her lips, raw and sharp. "Miles?" The name was a cracked whisper, torn from her throat. Her body tensed, a primal wave of maternal terror overriding the pain. "He's safe, Miss Prescott." A calm, deep voice cut through her panic. A man came into focus, sitting in a chair beside her bed. He was in his late 40s, wearing a rumpled suit, his face etched with the tired lines of too many long nights. "Detective Harding, CPD. Your son is with his nanny at your residence. He's fine." Sloane sagged back into the pillows, the relief so profound it felt like a second injury. She took in her surroundings. And 4 lines snaked into her arm. The detective held a small notepad. She was a victim. A file. But her mind, despite the fog of a severe concussion, was already working, connecting the dots. "My briefcase," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of its usual strength. "It was recovered at the scene. Most of the contents were scattered. We're having it all collected." "There was a drive," she insisted. "A secure drive. It's what they were after." Detective Harding raised an eyebrow. "We assumed it was a mugging gone wrong." "It was an execution gone wrong," Sloane corrected him, her eyes locking onto his. They weren't trying to rob me. They were trying to kill me. She took a steadying breath, the throbbing in her head intensifying with the effort. You want to know who has a motive? I sent out an email at 2:19 a.m. this morning, inviting my entire board to an emergency meeting. The subject was full financial disclosure. Harding leaned forward, his interest piqued. A disclosure of what? $17 million of embezzled funds, Sloane stated, the words cold and precise. I found proof, detective. An undeniable digital trail that leads directly to one man. She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle in the sterile air. My CFO, Harrison Thorne. The detective's expression remained neutral, but she could see the flicker of professional skepticism in his eyes. A powerful CEO accusing his second-in-command was a big leap. Mr. Thorne is a respected figure, Miss Prescott. That's a very serious allegation. And a fractured skull is a very serious injury, she countered, her voice laced with ice. Check the logs. Check Thorne's financials. He knew I was getting close. He panicked. Harding made a note. We'll look into it. For now you need to rest. You're lucky. The doctor said you had some internal bleeding, a significant concussion. If it weren't for the first responder, you likely would have aspirated before the ambulance arrived. Sloane frowned. First responder? I thought the security guard called it in. He did. But the person who saved you was the waitress from the cafe in your lobby. The statement was so unexpected it momentarily silenced her. Paige Russo, yes. According to the paramedics, she administered what they called textbook trauma care. Applied pressure, cleared your airway, put you in the recovery position. They said it was the kind of work they see from combat medics. Said she kept you alive. Sloane stared at the detective, her mind struggling to reconcile the image of the kind, smiling waitress with the concept of a combat medic. It didn't fit. Nothing about this fit. A quiet girl who served coffee had the skills to save her from a hit ordered by her multimillionaire CFO. The world had tilted on its axis. I need to see her, Sloane said, the words an order, not a request. I need to thank her. And, she thought, I need to understand who she really is. The adrenaline from the night before had long since worn off, leaving behind a residue of fear that felt like a fine layer of grit under Paige's skin. Sleep had been impossible. Every creak of her apartment building, every distant siren, sent a jolt of anxiety through her. Her world, once predictable and safe, now felt thin and fragile. It started subtly. A black sedan, a common enough sight in the city, was parked across the street when she left for a grocery run. It was still there when she returned an hour later, a lone figure, a dark silhouette behind the wheel. Coincidence, she told herself. But the feeling of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. Later that afternoon her phone rang. Blocked number. She hesitated, then answered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hello. Silence. Not the empty silence of a dead line, but a thick, deliberate quiet. She could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of breathing on the other end. Slow, calm, and utterly menacing. She slammed the phone down, her hand shaking. The final straw came when she returned from taking out the trash. As she slid her key into the lock of her apartment door, something felt wrong. The key resisted for a second before turning. She looked closer. Tiny, fresh scratches marred the brass around the keyhole. Someone had tried to pick her lock. Someone had been there. The sanctity of her home, her one safe space, was gone. She stumbled inside, locking and deadbolting the door, her back pressed against it as if she could hold the world at bay. The black sedan. The silent call. The lock. They weren't random events. They were a message. We know who you are. We know where you are. We can get to you. She was just a waitress. She had no power, no protection. She had done the right thing, and now a shadow loomed over her life. Tears of frustration and terror welled in her eyes. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled to the one contact she only used in emergencies. She knew calling him meant pulling him back from the edge of the world he'd built to protect himself. It meant waking the ghost. But the fear was too great. She had no other choice. She pressed the call button. He answered on the first ring. Cole, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think I'm in trouble. Thorne is now using intimidation to silence the woman who saved Sloane's life. If you can't stand manipulators who prey on innocent people to cover their crimes, Comment, courage below. People who think it's okay to bully others into silence won't. He didn't arrive in hours. He was there in 97 minutes. A soft, firm knock on her door made her jump. She peered through the peephole and saw him, a figure cloaked in the dim light of the hallway. When she opened the door, the brother she remembered was gone. Cole had always been quiet, but this was a different kind of silence. It was predatory. He was leaner than she remembered, all sinew and coiled tension, his face a hard, emotionless mask. But it was his eyes that terrified her. They were chips of ice, constantly moving, scanning the hallway behind him, the stairwell, the street visible through the window at the end of the hall. They missed nothing. He stepped inside without a word of greeting, his presence immediately shrinking the small apartment. He didn't look at her, he looked at the room. His gaze swept over every corner, every shadow, assessing angles and potential threats. He was a soldier on enemy soil. Doors and windows locked? He asked, his voice a low rasp. Yes, He was already moving, pulling a small handheld electronic device from the pocket of his worn leather jacket. He began a methodical sweep of the room, starting with the light fixtures and moving along the walls. Paige watched in stunned silence as he worked, his movements economical and precise. This was not her brother, the boy who used to teach her how to skip stones. This was a stranger. The device chirped softly as he passed it over a power outlet near the floor. Cole stopped. He knelt, produced a multi-tool and unscrewed the faceplate. Tucked inside, nestled amongst the wiring, was a tiny black disc with a pinhole microphone. It was a sophisticated, professional-grade listening device. Paige felt a wave of nausea. They had been in her home, listening. Cole didn't react. He simply plucked the bug from the wall, stood up, and crushed it under the heel of his boot with a quiet, decisive crunch. He then pulled a slim, featureless burner phone from his pocket and handed it to her. Your phone is a live mic for anyone who wants it to be, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Your laptop is a camera. You don't touch them again. From now on you use this. You will vary your route to and from work every day. You will not speak to anyone you don't know. You will text me the word check every 2 hours on the hour. If you miss one, I'm coming. The list of commands was delivered like a field briefing. Paige felt tears welling in her eyes, born of fear and a sudden, heartbreaking grief for the brother she had lost. Cole, what is happening? He finally looked at her, and for a fleeting second, she saw a flicker of the old Cole in his eyes, a deep, aching sadness. You didn't just witness a crime, Paige, he said, his voice low and intense. You intervened. You stabilized a target who was supposed to be taken off the board for good. In their eyes, you're not a witness anymore. You're a complication. He leaned in slightly, the full weight of his grim reality settling over her. And people like Harrison Thorne, they eliminate complications. A man who fought to leave his violent past behind is being dragged back in because of a greedy executive's crimes. Hit subscribe if you believe people deserve the chance to heal in peace. Only someone who sides with Thorne would think it's okay to destroy someone else's life for profit. The location was a ghost. A disused auto body shop in the city's forgotten industrial sector, smelling of rust, old oil, and decay. This was Cole's world, a place of shadows and escape routes. Sloane Prescott, her arm in a sling and a map of fading bruises on her cheekbone, felt a galaxy away from her polished corner office. She had followed the cryptic instructions delivered via a burner phone, her own security detail dismissed at Cole's insistence. They operate on a predictable grid, he'd said. Right now, that makes them a liability. Cole stood near a grimy window, a silhouette against the weak afternoon light. He hadn't offered her a seat. This wasn't a meeting, it was a briefing. The surveillance on Paige is professional, he began, his voice low and devoid of inflection. They aren't amateurs. They're mapping her patterns, her routines. Looking for a window. A window for what? Sloane asked, her voice tight. To remove the complication, he said, turning from the window to face her. His eyes were flat, analytical. They failed to kill you. You're a hard target now, hospital, security, police protection. So they'll go after the soft target. The one who saw too much, the one who can identify the attackers if they're ever caught. They'll go after my sister. A chill, colder than the damp air in the garage, snaked down Sloane's spine. This is because of me. Because she helped me. It's because she exists, Cole corrected her, his tone brutal in its honesty. For men like Thorne, that's enough. He's not just trying to cover up a crime anymore. You wounded his pride. You exposed him. This is personal. He wants to hurt you, to unravel your life piece by piece. Paige is the first piece. The weight of it was crushing. She had pulled this innocent woman into a war she wasn't equipped to fight. What do we do? I'm moving her to a secure location tonight. After that, he trailed off. His hand went to his pocket, not with a sense of urgency, but with a sudden, preternatural stillness. His phone hadn't rung. It had given a single, silent vibration. He pulled it out, his thumb swiping across the screen. Sloane watched his face. For the first time since she'd met him, the stony, impenetrable mask cracked. It wasn't fear or panic. It was a flash of something far colder, a sudden, absolute focus that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. He held the phone out for her to see. On the screen was a simple map of the city. Stationary pin was labeled Oakwood Elementary. A second pin, a small blinking red dot labeled Miles, was moving. It was already several blocks away from the school, heading east on the interstate, traveling at speed. The air in Sloane's lungs turned to ice. Before a sound could escape her lips, her own phone, the one clutched in her hand, began to ring, the shrill sound an alien scream in the dead quiet of the garage. The caller ID read, Oakwood Elementary. Her hand shook as she answered. "This is Sloane Prescott." "Miss Prescott." The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless. It was Mrs. Davison, the school's principal. "Miss Prescott, it's Miles. There was a situation on the playground." Sloane's world narrowed to the voice on the phone. Cole's gaze was locked on her, his face grim. "What situation?" Sloane demanded, her voice a strained whisper. A man came to the gate during recess. He said you were tied up in an emergency meeting and that you'd sent him to pick Miles up early for a doctor's appointment. He had a note. It looked like your signature." The principal's voice broke, thick with panic and guilt. "The teacher on duty, she let him go. We just called your office to confirm and they said there was no appointment. Miss Prescott, he's gone. Miles is gone." The line went dead, the connection dropping or the principal simply hanging up in her hysteria. It didn't matter. The phone slipped from Sloane's nerveless fingers, clattering onto the concrete floor. The cold, logical pieces slammed together in her mind with the force of a physical blow. Thorne wasn't trying to hurt her anymore. He wasn't trying to silence her. He was trying to break her. He had taken her son. A primal, keening sound tried to claw its way up Sloane's throat, but she choked it back. The air in the derelict garage was thick and suffocating. Her world, once a carefully constructed fortress, had been reduced to a single blinking red dot on a phone screen. Miles, her son, gone. Just as a wave of blackness threatened to pull her under, the burner phone Cole had given her buzzed against the concrete floor where it had fallen. The screen lit up with a single chilling word, unknown. Cole was there in an instant, his hand a steadying weight on her shoulder. "Answer it," he commanded, his voice a low, grounding anchor in her storm of panic. "Put it on speaker. No emotion. You're a rock. Understand?" She nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion, and scooped up the phone. Her thumb trembled as she accepted the call. "You've had a busy day, Sloane." The voice on the other end was smooth, familiar, and laced with a smug satisfaction that made her blood run cold. It was Harrison Thorne. "Where is he, Harrison?" Sloane's voice was a dead, flat thing. All the terror, all the rage, was compressed into a diamond-hard core of control. "The boy is fine. For now," Thorne said, the casual cruelty of his words designed to twist the knife. "He's quite taken with the new iPad we got him. He's resilient. A credit to you. What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. What I'm owed," he said. A sigh of theatrical weariness came through the speaker. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries. You will go home. You will retrieve the secure drive. You will wipe it, then you will physically destroy it. Second, you will draft your letter of resignation, effective immediately, citing the extreme stress of your recent accident. And third, and most importantly, you will initiate the transfer of your controlling shares in Prescott Industries to a designated holding company." Sloane's mind reeled. This was more than covering a crime. This was the complete annihilation of her life's work. "What holding company?" Thorne chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I'm glad you asked. It's called Caspian Dynamics. The name hit Sloane like a physical blow. Caspian Dynamics was a ruthless, predatory rival firm run by Julian Croft, a man her father had publicly humiliated and driven to the brink of bankruptcy a decade ago. Croft had vanished from the corporate world, a ghost nursing a legendary grudge. "Croft," she breathed. "Julian sends his regards," Thorne confirmed, his voice dripping with venomous pleasure. "He never forgot what your father did to him. The embezzlement was just seed money, Sloane. The down payment on a debt that's long overdue. This isn't just a theft. It's a hostile takeover. It's revenge." It all snapped into place. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. Harrison, her father's friend, had been a Trojan horse, waiting years for the perfect moment to burn her empire to the ground from within, all in service of an old vendetta. "You have until 9 p.m., Thorne's voice sharpened, "all business. If I have the confirmation of the transfer, the boy will be left unharmed at a location I designate. If you call the police if I sense for 1 second you aren't complying, you will never see him again." The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier, more absolute, than anything Sloane had ever known. They took the child. Harrison Thorne has proven there is no line he won't cross. Comment, protect the innocent, right now if you stand against this monster. Absolute cowards are the only ones who would stay silent. For a moment, Sloane's body betrayed her. Her legs gave way and she would have collapsed if not for Cole's arm, a band of steel catching her. The rock crumbled and a single ragged sob escaped her lips. "They have him. They have my son." Cole didn't offer sympathy. He offered something better, a mission. He pulled her upright, his grip firm on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his intense, icy gaze. "Breathe, Sloane," he commanded, his voice sharp, cutting through her despair. "Panic is a luxury we don't have. He needs his mother right now. Not a victim." The words were harsh, but they were a splash of cold water. He was right. The grief could wait. The fear could wait. Right now there was only the fight. She straightened up, her spine stiffening, the businesswoman's mask of cold fury slotting back into place. "He thinks he's in control," Cole said, his eyes already scanning the digital map on his phone, his mind processing variables at an incredible speed. "He's made a list of demands, given you a deadline. He believes you're a civilian who will follow the rules. That's his mistake. We're going to take that control from him." He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not a broken soldier, but a predator who had just been handed a target. "You fight him in the world you know," Cole stated, a plan already forming. "I'll fight him in mine." The partnership was forged in that moment, a silent, deadly pact. While Sloane's mind had been paralyzed, his had been racing. "The tracker in Miles's backpack is cheap, easy to find and discard," Cole said, his thumb swiping through screens. "They'll assume it's our only asset. But it gives me a last known vector and a vehicle description from the school's traffic cameras." He pulled out his own burner phone, typing a rapid, coded message with one thumb. "I have one contact left from my old life who owes me. Someone who can access satellite feeds and cross-reference them with highway patrol data without raising flags. He'll find the vehicle." While he worked, Sloane's mind ignited. Julian Croft. Caspian Dynamics. Thorne had given her a new enemy and with it, a new weapon. She wasn't just a mother in despair anymore. She was a CEO at war. She pulled out her own burner and made a single call to the one person on her board she knew was loyal to her father's memory. "Arthur," she said, her voice a low command. "I need you to execute a ghost protocol. I'm sending you a company name. Caspian Dynamics. I want every piece of financial data you can get your hands on. Leverage, debt to equity, private holdings. I don't care how you get it. I want to know where they are vulnerable. I want to know where to stick the knife." The despair was gone, burned away by a cold, calculating rage. Cole was hunting a car. She was hunting a corporation. Thorne and Croft thought they were breaking a grieving mother. They had no idea they had just unleashed two monsters. The air by the waterfront was thick with the smell of salt and decay, a miasma rising from the black, still water and the rotting piers. The warehouse stood like a tombstone against the bruised twilight sky, a skeletal husk of forgotten industry. From a vantage point half a mile away, Cole had watched it for the last hour, observing the patterns of the 2 sentries outside. They were lazy, overconfident. Thorne's money had bought muscle, not discipline. Cole moved as the last sliver of sun died behind the horizon, plunging the industrial wasteland into near-total darkness. He didn't run, he flowed, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. The first guard was leaning against a rusted container, scrolling on his phone, the pale blue light illuminating his bored expression. He never heard Cole approach. There was a whisper of displaced air, a sudden, precise pressure at the base of his neck, and his world dissolved into blackness. Cole caught the body before it fell, lowered it silently to the ground, and secured his hands and mouth with zip ties and duct tape. One down. Inside, the cavernous space was a maze of stacked, forgotten cargo and derelict machinery. Two more men sat at a makeshift table under a single bare bulb, a game of poker spread between them. Their conversation was a low murmur, their senses dulled by boredom. This was the moment. Cole picked up a heavy, discarded wrench. He didn't throw it at them. He threw it 50 feet away into a pile of sheet metal. The resulting clang was an explosion in the silence. "What the hell was that?" one of the men barked, jumping to his feet, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. "Rats," the other grumbled, though he stood as well. "Go check it out." They separated. It was the last mistake either of them would make. Cole moved through the darkness like a phantom. The first man was taken from behind, a swift, brutal chokehold cutting off his air supply until he slumped unconscious. The second turned at the sound of the body falling, his eyes wide with panic. Cole was already on him, a blur of controlled violence. A sharp strike to the wrist sent the gun clattering away, followed by a disabling blow to the knee. The man crumpled, screaming, but Cole muffled the sound, his hand clamped over the man's mouth until he too was bound and silenced. He moved deeper into the warehouse, following the faint sound of a cartoon coming from a small cinderblock office in the far corner. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, a large, broad-shouldered man sat with his back to the door, watching a tablet propped on a desk. And in a small chair beside him, illuminated by the flickering colors of the screen, was Miles. Miles was a world away, but Sloane's battle was just as intense. From a sterile, anonymous hotel room she had turned into a digital command center. She initiated her gambit. The data Arthur had pulled on Caspian Dynamics was a treasure trove of corruption. For years, Julian Croft had been using a network of illegal offshore shell corporations to launder money and evade taxes, all while building a war chest for his revenge. Sloane didn't leak the information to the authorities. That was too slow, too uncertain. She sent the entire encrypted package to Bennett Vance, a ruthless, Pulitzer-winning financial journalist known for his ability to smell blood in the water from 1,000 miles away. The subject line was simple: the real Caspian. She knew Bennett wouldn't just report the news. He would become the narrative, a shark tearing a chunk out of a rival predator. Simultaneously, she executed a massive short sell on Caspian stock through a series of anonymous international brokers, a multi-million-dollar bet that the company was about to implode. As Bennett's first explosive article hit the web, Caspian's pre-market stock began to hemorrhage value. But Sloane kept digging, sifting through the last of Arthur's data. Tucked away in a hidden subfolder labeled Contingency, she found it. It was an internal Caspian memo, outlining their plan for the final phase of the takeover. And there, in cold corporate language, was the second twist. The plan detailed the complete isolation of Harrison Thorne, framing him not just for the Prescott embezzlement but for Caspian's own financial crimes. The final line was chilling, at which point the Thorne liability will be permanently neutralized. They weren't just going to frame him. They were going to kill him. Thorne wasn't their partner. He was their patsy, the final loose end to be snipped. Sloane's fingers flew across her keyboard. She took a screenshot of the memo, a digital death sentence. As she attached it to a new, anonymous message, she could almost feel Cole closing in on his target. Her war and his were about to converge. The message was addressed to one recipient, the burner phone Thorne was using. She typed a single sentence. "They're playing you, Harrison." Her finger hovered over the send button, waiting. Back in the warehouse office, Cole took a silent, calming breath. The man inside, the lead kidnapper, was armed. A direct assault was too risky with Miles just feet away. He needed a different weapon. Psychology. He stepped into the doorway. "Let the boy go." The kidnapper, a man named Kepler, spun around, yanking Miles from his chair and pulling him in front of his body like a shield. A gun appeared in his hand, its black muzzle pointed at Cole. Miles let out a terrified whimper. "Stay back." Kepler snarled, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Cole held his hands up slowly, palms open. Nobody needs to get hurt here, Kepler. The man flinched. How do you know my name? I know Thorne doesn't pay you enough for this, Cole said, his voice a low, reasonable hum. Murder, maybe. But kidnapping a CEO's son? That brings a different kind of heat. Federal. The kind that never goes away. You think Thorne or his backers are going to protect you when that happens? Cole took a half step forward. They're not. They'll cut you loose. You'll be the only one left holding the bag. Kepler's gun hand trembled slightly. He was a professional, but he was in over his head. Cole saw the flicker of doubt, the seed of self-preservation. Let him go, Cole said again, his voice dropping even lower. Walk out of here. Disappear. It's your only move. For a split second, Kepler's gaze darted to the side, weighing his options. It was the only opening Cole needed. He exploded forward, a single fluid motion. He didn't go for the man, he went for the boy. He swept Miles out of the line of fire, tucking him behind his body as he slammed the office door shut with his back foot. The gun fired, the shot deafening in the small space, splintering the wooden doorframe. At that exact moment, miles away in a hotel room, Sloane's finger pressed down. The message, Thorne's death warrant, flew across the city's digital network. The trap was sprung. Thorne and his backers at Caspian believe their money and power make them untouchable. Smash the like button if you stand for integrity over corruption. Only people who admire criminals would want them to win. The storm broke with the sound of approaching sirens. Cole stood in the yawning mouth of the warehouse, the cool night air washing over them. Miles was wrapped in his jacket, shivering but safe, his small arms locked around Cole's neck. The first police cruiser skidded to a halt, its red and blue lights painting the scene in frantic, strobing colors. But this wasn't just a local police response. Black tactical vans swarmed the area, disgorging teams of FBI agents in full gear. Bennett Vance's article and his subsequent tip to his federal sources had turned a kidnapping into a full-blown federal investigation into corporate terrorism. Simultaneously, across town, a different kind of assault was taking place. FBI agents stormed the gleaming, marble-and-glass lobby of Caspian Dynamics headquarters. Julian Croft was apprehended in his penthouse office, his expression of arrogant disbelief captured for the evening news. The raid was swift, total, and devastating. Caspian's empire, built on a decade of secret crimes, crumbled in less than an hour. The final piece fell into place in a luxury suite at the Four Seasons. Harrison Thorne stared at the screen of his burner phone, at the screenshot of the contingency memo. He saw the cold, corporate language that signed his death warrant. They were going to kill him. The realization hit him not with rage, but with a cold, clammy wave of terror. His loyalty, his years of service to Croft's vendetta, it meant nothing. He was disposable. In that moment, his self-preservation instinct, honed over a lifetime of treachery, took over completely. When the FBI kicked in his door, he didn't resist. He surrendered and he began to talk. The reunion happened hours later, in the quiet, sterile hush of a police precinct family room. The door opened and Cole walked in, Miles still clinging to him. Sloane was on her feet in an instant. The CEO was gone. The warrior was gone. There was only a mother. She didn't run. She moved toward them slowly as if in a dream, her eyes locked on her son's face. Cole gently set Miles down, and the little boy launched himself into his mother's arms. Sloane collapsed to her knees, clutching him, her face buried in his hair. A sound escaped her, half sob, half laugh, a raw, ragged noise of pure, undiluted relief. "Mommy," Miles whispered into her ear, his voice muffled. "Cole's a superhero." Sloane looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes meeting Cole's over her son's head. There were no words. There didn't need to be. In his steady, unwavering gaze, she saw a reflection of her own fight, her own refusal to break. It was a look of profound, soul-deep gratitude, of admiration, and of a shared, silent understanding. A bond forged in the heart of the fire. The storm was over. And in the quiet aftermath, something new was just beginning. 3 months later, the city's financial landscape had been irrevocably altered. The names Harrison Thorne and Julian Croft were now synonymous with disgrace, their empires dismantled by a combination of federal indictments and catastrophic market collapse. Prescott Industries, leaner and stronger, stood firm under Sloane's undisputed leadership. But the victory had changed her. The battles had forged a new purpose, one that found its voice not in a boardroom, but in the quiet, resolute mission of the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit she had established to provide legal and financial aid to victims of corporate crime. Its director, running the daily operations with a fierce compassion born of experience, was Paige Russo. The final scene of their war was not written in newspaper headlines or stock tickers. It was written in flour and tomato sauce. Sloane's kitchen, a warm, inviting space of sun-bleached wood and gleaming copper pots, was a happy disaster zone. Laughter, easy and genuine, echoed off the high ceilings. Miles stood on a stool, his face dusted with flour, meticulously arranging pepperoni slices on a small pizza dough. "It needs to be a perfect circle, Cole," he instructed, his expression one of deep concentration. Cole, leaning against the counter, had a small smudge of flour on his own cheek. The haunted, hypervigilant soldier was gone. In his place was a man at ease, the hard lines around his eyes softened by a quiet smile. He caught Sloane's gaze from across the marble island, a silent conversation passing between them, a shared acknowledgement of the impossible peace they had found. He was no longer a ghost hiding in the mountains. He was a guardian in a sunlit kitchen. Paige slid another finished pizza onto a baking stone, her movements as graceful as they had been behind the cafe counter, but now infused with a lightness that hadn't been there before. She looked at her brother, at the powerful CEO now debating the merits of pineapple on pizza with her son, and saw her family whole and restored. They were a mosaic, each of them scarred by the fire. Sloane, the queen who had been forced to become a warrior. Paige, the quiet helper who had discovered her own immense strength. Miles, the boy whose world had been stolen and then returned to him. And Cole, the ghost who had stepped back into the light to protect them all. Their broken pieces had not been perfectly mended. They had been fitted together to create something new, something stronger. This kitchen wasn't just a room in a house. It was a sanctuary they had built together. For the first time in 8 years, Cole was finally home. Justice was served. Thorne's empire of greed and fear is in ruins. If you're glad to see the villains get exactly what they deserved, hit subscribe and be the first to know when we expose the next monster. Trolls and manipulators can stay away. This channel is for heroes.